For this module, we were asked what experiences have we had with interactive technologies as a student or teacher. And in my high school, when I was in high school, we used a lot of the interactive whiteboards. And my teachers usually just used them to take notes, and then they would be able to easily access videos with that during their lectures. And I also had another teacher who used Kahoot in her classroom, and we would just use that mostly before tests and stuff. That way we could just kind of practice example questions like what was going to be on the test, and it was just kind of a nice way to study and wind down a little bit before a test. And then when I did some observations in the first grade, the teacher there used an interactive whiteboard also. And for like her math classes and stuff, if they were dealing with a die or something, she'd pull up like this website that had a die you were able to roll online. And so the students would just come over to the whiteboard and just press the die, and it would roll for them so that they could do their math examples. And I always thought that was really neat to kind of just to get those younger kids kind of starting to use that interactive technology. Next, we were asked which rendition of the interactive whiteboard and remote would we choose and why, and which interactive app did we like the most, and if we could only choose one, which would it be? Okay, so I really liked the Turning Technologies interactive whiteboards because I thought they were just really sleek and simple, and they didn't look overly complicated to use. And I also liked that they gave the option to have their interactive whiteboard on wheels. That way you can just kind of like pull it in and out whenever you need it, instead of having it just like mounted onto your wall and in the middle of everything. Because sometimes I like to use a regular whiteboard more than maybe an interactive whiteboard to take notes or whatever, just because it's simpler to use and it's right there. It's kind of handy without having to pull anything extra up. And the style of remote that I liked was the Clicker Plus remote, and I just liked that one because it was really simple. It just had like 4 buttons, and that was it. It wasn't overly complicated, and I feel like it's something that would easily be able to use in a lower grade school classroom. And then for the apps, I really liked Kahoot just because I've used it before, but I also really liked the Pear Deck because it uses Google, and I thought it'd be an awesome way to just interpret those interactive activities into a presentation or something if you're using Google Slides. So I thought that would be really great if you want to put everything all into one. And then lastly, we were asked what our thoughts were and what we learned after reading the article, and do we think that we would have similar results if we utilize clickers in the future classroom. And so I thought the article was really insightful, and I think clickers might be more for maybe high school or college level classes, just to get students kind of more willing to participate, just because a lot of times you don't really want to, even if you're there, you don't really want to participate. You're just kind of there to take your notes and go. So I think maybe the clickers would be really helpful there. And I guess it could be pretty helpful in an elementary classroom also, just for that participation thing. But I also really think it'd be helpful in an elementary classroom. That way it's not getting students to go out of their comfort zone by having to speak up in class, because a lot of times students in lower elementary classes won't speak up because they're afraid to in class, and so they don't participate as much, and therefore they're not really learning as much as maybe the other students are. And so I think the clickers are just a great way to be able to have all students equally participate without having to go out of their comfort zones. And I also think that clickers really hold students accountable. Like, if each individual student has their own clicker and you know which students are not participating, then it kind of shows you maybe who you need to get together with more to make sure that they're participating or understanding the information. So it's just kind of that accountability thing. And that's the end of my reflection for this module. Thanks for listening.